she got the load. I met her in a parking lot, and then I had her follow to actually one of my personal residence, which I rarely did. I usually would bring them somewhere else to a piece of property or a stash house or something. So I opened up the trailer and I just kind of scanned the situation, and I noticed a little wire hanging in the ceiling. And I went up and looked over, and it was a battery pack connected to some device with a red dot, red blinking light, and I knew it was a tracking device. And I just put my fingers up to my mouth. I go, don't say a word. I saw across about 300, 200 yards out, a Chevy Impala sitting off in the distance, and I knew that trailer was being tracked and followed by the feds. And I had a good run. At this point in the game, I had done well over 300 million in sales.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am here with Eric Canori. And Eric has an interesting story. He was, you were the largest.
I was one of the largest high-end cannabis dealers on the East Coast of the United States before it was legal in any state. Okay. Late 90s going into the early 2000s. I actually got popped in 2009. That was before it was legal in Colorado.
Okay. So we're going to be doing an interview, and so check it out. So I mean, let's start at the beginning. Like where were you born?
I was born in Rochester, New York. 1979, January 8th.
All right.
That's it, man. Shouldn't put all that out there probably right now. So you can probably steal my identity, right?
Makes you think I don't already have your identity. I was going to say, shoot, on Wikipedia, probably. Wikipedia, they've got my date of birth and everything.
It's it's true. Yeah, you can't do much with that.
But New York or Rochester's the only, well, no, actually, I've been in New York City just recently, but I actually went there and went to Niagara Falls. So I've been to Rochester.
Yeah. I was only there until age 6, and then I moved out. But that was,
okay.
Yeah.
Where'd you move?
I moved to upstate New York, Lake George, New York, little town called Queensbury near Lake George. Lived there from age 6 right up till college.
Okay. With both parents?
Parents were divorced when I was 2. There was a lot of partying going on back then on my mom's side, so I kind of had the rock style lifestyle around me in my crib.
Right.
So I grew up in that environment, and parents divorced when I was 2. My mom remarried when she was 4, and then we moved to upstate New York, Lake George, New York, and that's where I started my life, kindergarten, and went up from there.
Right. But you guys didn't, I mean, from what I understand, you didn't have a lot of money, like, you weren't, like, you started selling.
Yeah, if you looked at me as an outsider, I was well kept. I had a tucked in shirt. Right. My laundry was done. My sneakers looked okay. I had a backpack for school, packed lunch, but we lived frugally, right? We cut coupons on Sundays. We rarely went to the drive-thrus unless we had a coupon. You don't wear holes out in your clothes because then you'd have to buy new ones. So you just have to be careful on how we spent our money.
Right. When did you? So I mean, at what point did you decide, like, you were going to start, selling pot or?
When all the kids,
because I understand it started slow. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you woke up one day and said, "I'm going to go open up a dispensary."
Well, as a kid, I always watched the movies, and I liked the fast cars. I liked the pretty women, and I couldn't have any of that. Women didn't notice me in school. I didn't have new sneakers. I didn't have the coolest name brand clothes. I wasn't a professional athlete. Right. I was a very quiet kid that kind of just hung out in the background, and I just watched everybody, and I always wanted something more than I already had. So in middle school, I started selling candy to the kids. I would buy it with my lunch money, 80 cents. Maybe I'd buy 8 packs of Pez for 10 cents a piece, flip them, make $1.60, and then I'd have profit to 80 cents profit, and I could still eat lunch that day. And I started selling candy for a couple of years until I got shut down by one of the teachers. And then I started smoking weed. I started smoking weed probably in 9th, 10th grade. But for me, weed was a thing that I could do to help me socialize. Because if I was fucked up, I didn't have to really talk about the truth of my life. I came from a troubled childhood. It was very abusive, like not much money. And drugs were a way for me to hide the reality of my life. So I started smoking weed at a very young age, but I couldn't afford weed. It was expensive. Like, I could mow a few lawns and shovel some driveways, make a little money, but I still couldn't afford to really also get Taco Bell or pizza, right? So eventually kids started asking me for weed, and I started selling weed in high school.
Right. Yeah. I think, you mentioned this earlier. It's like most people. Well, you didn't mention it. I actually watched, I think you mentioned it on another video I saw where you were talking about how, like, most people, most guys that are selling drugs come from, a fucked up background. It's out of desperation. Like very few people I think are raised saying, "Hey, I want to grow up and be a drug dealer."
Exactly.
So it's usually out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
But I think in my own case, it's like when I started doing crime, it was out of necessity. But then you start making the money, and it's like, okay, well, now you've got the money, you're doing okay. Then it becomes, I think, kind of an ego thing. I mean, it was for me. It was like once I was doing well, it was like, well, I could have cut back, but instead, now this is something I was good at. I hope you're enjoying the video. I have a quick word from our sponsor, StanEdge Watches. We're doing a promotion with StanEdge right now where they're offering a watch that they sell for typically $300. They're selling that watch through the channel for $200. The first 10 people that send me an email saying that they want a watch, I will arrange payment with them and shoot you a watch out as quickly as possible. They're great watches. They come in a bunch of different colors, and I really like them. I appreciate you guys watching. Go in the description box where my email is, and you can send me an email. See ya.
Yeah.
So is that the same kind of thing?
I think it was partly not ego, but it was also fear too, right? I never wanted to go back to a place subconsciously of not knowing where I'm going to get my next meal.
Right.
'Cause if you like don't know where you're going to sleep or eat that night, that's a place where you're like, fuck. And I've been there as a child. So I wasn't really that flashy. I was flashy. Listen, we all want to be seen and recognized, at least most of the men I know, and we just have different ways of doing it, whether it's a trophy, the newest sneakers, that coolest car, best looking girlfriend, like whatever. We want to be recognized. At least I did. So it feels good when somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I like your new car, your new bike, or this or that. But I'm still kind of a low-key guy, but it cost me a lot to live. Mostly, I spent most of my money on women in hotels. That's where a lot of my money would go. And I didn't have a lot of things because I didn't want to get on the Fed's radar. But
well, I mean, this was in high school, right? You're talking.
Oh, in high school. In high school, I wasn't making a lot of money, man. I make $100 a week. Right. Well, actually, that's pretty good money back then.
I was going to say for a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah. Oh, that's good money. What am I talking about? Maybe yeah. And then I'd buy everybody weed and beer. I shouldn't say exactly how much I was making. I was making enough to eat Taco Bell, beer, and free weed. Right.
Well, so, I mean, at what point when you graduated high school, did you go to college?
I went to Plattsburgh State University. It's about a half hour from the Canadian border in upstate New York.
Okay.
And when I went there, I only had about $500 in my bank account. And I remember when I got to college, the brochure said that kids should have at least $1,500 per semester for extracurricular activities, which I didn't have.
But you had $500.
I had $500, which was enough to buy 2 ounces and flip and turn into $750. And then I just started multiplying that, and I became the cannabis kid on campus. There were a lot of people that sold cannabis in Plattsburgh. We're going back 1997, 98, 99. But eventually, I created somewhat of a monopoly, and I got the other dealers to buy from me, and I shrunk my margins down a little bit, but I pretty much had a good control of the market by year 3, 4 of me being there.
Well, where are you getting it from? I mean, if you're starting to move, you know what I'm saying? You're starting to move product. I mean, usually the one guy you're basically wiping him out pretty quick if you're buying more and more and more.
Yeah. I was, last year at college, I was probably doing about 50 to 100,000 a month in sales. And I had about 4 to 5 suppliers. I had my townie, a couple townie guys, and I had multiple different suppliers, so they wouldn't jack the price too much on me. Because if they knew they had me, if they knew I was the only place I was getting it, they would charge me whatever. But I created bidding wars.
Is this like the cartel, guys that they're getting it from the cartel?
I wasn't dealing with cartel guys. This is smaller time townies in Plattsburgh State. Also, there's an Indian reservation about an hour and a half away from there that's right on the Canadian border on the St. Regis River,
right,
where they basically can smuggle anything you want: cigarettes, coke, guns, immigrants, and they can do that at night with night vision. They have boats that can do 80 miles an hour in 6 inches of water, right? Because if they I don't know the exact terminology, but if they get going fast enough, the hull's only going to sit so much in the water that they can go they have special boats that they can evade law enforcement if they were to be chased. And then they get the product to shore, unload it, boom. And
so it's coming in from Canada.
Canada was where my main supplier. I started focusing and working with them because it was a higher end product. It was indoor. The stuff that I was getting domestically was all outdoor weed at that time, back in 98, 99. But when I had the Canadian weed, that kind of set me apart from a lot of the competition. It was a higher end product.
Well, that's a ton of money to be making as a college student.
That wasn't my profit. Let's say 100,000 is revenue that month. I'd probably make,
if it's
20, 30 grand.
I was gonna say, if it's $20,000 for a fucking I wish I was making $20,000. I'm a grown man. $20,000 a month is a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, and I even had a little heat on me in Plattsburgh in 01 when I was getting ready to graduate. There was a coke bust that went down, and my people that were buying weed off me were using my money to go down to the city, Manhattan, to buy blow and then bring it back to Plattsburgh. And I kind of knew, but I didn't really pay attention. I didn't get too close to it. But after they took that little ring down, they had a couple of those guys try to wear wires on me. One of them actually got close to me, and I let him come wear the wire on me, and I kind of just gave them some false information so the case would diffuse itself. And they only watched me for a couple months because I was a smaller player. I mean, doing 100,000 a month, or they didn't even know I was doing that much. They thought I was doing about 50,000. They thought my net worth was about 60 grand. The DEA is not going to spend money chasing somebody that's only worth 60 grand. They might watch you for a week or two, seeing if they can get something. They have bigger fish to fry.
So, okay, well, so why weren't you a part of the coke thing? You just did. Why you just didn't move coke? You just weren't interested in coke?
I remember watching the TV show Miami Vice as a kid, and I would always I loved the fast cars and the women, but I also always would see all the heat that came with that.
Yeah.
And I knew weed was more acceptable. Like, I could stand in front of a judge and be like, yeah, I sold weed.
Right.
But if I stood in front of a judge and said I sold coke, they might be like, kid, you fucked up.
Yeah.
But weed, it's like, chances are the judge probably smoked weed at some point.
Right. I was going to say, I have, so I wrote a story called American Narco. And it was this guy, Kerry, and his buddy. They were selling weed for the cartel in Fort Myers, and he was offered like multiple times. They tried to get him to start moving coke, and he absolutely wouldn't do it. Like it was the same kind of thing. He was like, I felt like weed was acceptable, and he said I just felt like coke was like a hard drug and a dangerous drug, and it would be dangerous to move it. And he said so he just completely stayed away from it, even though he knew he'd make a lot more money. He's like, I just felt like it's just weed.
Yeah, weed's not a big deal. Coke's a lot easier to move as far as smuggling because it's smaller. You can build a compartment. Like, we used to build hydraulic compartments as I got a little bigger in the game, like false beds.
Yeah.
You could have a compartment where you would literally take your credit card and just stick it up in the corner where the windshield meets the visor, and then press, one button on the radio station, and then hold the cruise control down or something like that. And the whole back bed would raise 8 inches, and the bumper would pop out hydraulically, and you could throw in like 100 pounds in there. Or there were other things like, the dually pickup trucks that have the big wheel wells over the top. You could stuff like 1 million in each side of those on a truck. Yeah,
Kerry said one time they showed up in an RV, and they went to the radio and did something on the radio and pulled something. And he said this little tiny hatch raised up at the bottom of the RV. He said tiny. They reached down and they started pulling pounds of weed. It was all attached. Yeah, like on a string.
Yep,
like it was 1 pound, and here's another pound. And he said, he said they kept going and going and going. And he said it got to the point where he said I was terrified. He said when it got to like 200 or 300 pounds of it, he said I was like, this is too much. Yeah. But yeah, he was. It's amazing what they can come up with. They even busted a guy like 5 or 10 years ago for making the compartments. He was making these super amazing, stealth compartments in vehicles, any vehicle. Like you could just, you touch this and it'd pop up, and you could put a couple pounds. And he was trying to say that, he went to trial saying, how am I supposed to know what these guys are bringing in cars?
He probably got out of it.
Yeah, I think he got a couple of years, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Then he had some knowledge then of what was going on.
Yeah.
Then.
Well, yeah, I guess maybe, I don't know.
He could have claimed plausible deniability, so where he said he had no clue, but they had a wire or something, obviously.
Yeah, in the feds, you just need 1 or 2 guys to get on the stand and say, he knew.
That sucks.
And, the jury's like, He'll probably won't get any time at all. And then they find him guilty and he goes away for 5 years. They're like, oh my God, I thought he'd get probation.
You know, as high up as I was in the business, I never really completely understood that all you need is 2 people to say he did that. That's the only evidence you knew. And I always was like, they really need a wire or like a buy or
they don't
something
even
like
need the drugs.
Yeah, that's what's scary.
Yeah.
That's why it's
terrifying. Like, I have guys that reach out to me and ask me, you know, they'll hit me up and be like, talk about, you know, hey bro, like contact me, you know, like I'll pay you if you'll just talk to me. Like, basically talk to them about a scam, help them run a scam, help them. And I'm like, well, you don't understand that. Like, I can't be involved in something like that. And then they'll go, nah, bro, I would never say anything. First of all, I don't believe that. But let's say you didn't say anything. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm on your phone. You can see transactions. There will be times when our phones are near each other. There will be times when you flew down here. There will be times, like, don't you understand that I'm a convicted felon of fraud? They'll just add my name to the indictment. I can't even get on the stand and say, this is what happened. Because as soon as I get on the stand, they'll say, Mr. Cox, how many frauds have you been convicted of? And the jury's going to be like, oh, come on. This guy's been convicted of 30 different frauds. He's been doing this on and off his whole life. Oh, he's involved. Like, you're just done.
Yeah, you're done.
The feds it's horrible in the feds. Like, you just can't beat them. I always say that, look, if you're guilty, that's it, you're done. And if you're not guilty, you got about an 80% chance of being found guilty.
There you go.
So, but anyway, I was going to say, so you get out of college. So you get out of college, you dropped selling weed, you went and got a job as an accountant, and you just became an accountant, and now you're here, right? So
nah, that's not that easy. Never got a job. I got out of college. I tried to make a resume in the campus library. I put the floppy disk in the computer. I couldn't figure out how to get the resume to save on the floppy disk. I couldn't even figure out how to get the printer to work. Remember those printers that had like the holes along the side of the paper? You'd like, I don't even remember what those were called, from IBM.
Yeah.
But I couldn't figure that
matrix.
Dot matrix. There you go. So I couldn't even figure out how to get all that work. I was like, you know what? And that was right around the time the movie Office Space came out. Remember with the TPS reports?
I love Office Space.
So, dude, I'm watching all this stuff, and everything was just telling me I'm not going to be working for anybody but myself. So I got out of college. I was a little scared with that DEA heat. It was like, that was a wake up call, right? Like, don't be stupid. So I told myself I'm going to graduate with a clean record. I'm going to move an hour and a half south of the border where there's less heat and nobody knows me. And I moved into a small little town called Saratoga Springs, New York. And I set up a legitimate business there, building natural swimming pools, waterfalls, ponds. And that was my front. And I told myself, I'm going to come to this town. I'm not going to talk to anybody about anything illicit. And I'm not going to distribute any drugs in this town whatsoever. All my business will be out of state, or at least 3 hours away. The closest place I'll be working is New York City.
Did you have any experience at all in putting in
I'm pretty handy.
Fountain. They're not pools, right?
Yeah. There was some few like swimming ponds that I had done too, 30 foot deep, and then I did a larger one that was a few acres. So they were all different sizes, but most of them were backyard koi ponds, like anywhere from 10 feet up to 30 feet wide.
Okay.
So I took some seminars and training on that, but I'm pretty handy as a kid. I used to do a lot of little construction stuff, so that was a good front for me, and I made decent money, right? I probably made close to 6 figures in a summer, being 21, 22, that's good money back then.
Yeah.
So I did that, but at night when I was done with that is when I would take care of my cannabis business, and that's where I would accept deliveries from the Canadian border that would come down to one of my stash houses. And then I would, from there, package it up into different size loads and deliver it south. Were you like running your profit through that company, or? No, that's one thing I never did, is I never commingled funds.
Right.
So, I wasn't making my books were only showing what I made, whether it was 80 grand, 90, whatever it was on the waterfall business.
Did you have people working for you, or was
it was seasonal? I would like sub people out that would come in, an excavator. I'd have 3 or 4 guys moving dirt and rocks, but I didn't have full-time crew, staff.
Okay. You're saying it gradually just got larger and larger. I mean,
both businesses the pond business got a little larger, and the cannabis became significantly larger. Okay. I was good at what I did. I followed through. I was always delivered on time.
Right.
If I got a shitty load, I wouldn't then sell it. I would remediate it, whether it meant unpackaging it all and drying it out or making it weighed properly or removing any of the sticks or stems or seeds, anything. I just made sure my customers were always happy and my suppliers were happy by me paying on time. And I always kind of put myself last. I was a simple dude in the beginning, bro. I had a mattress and a car. Like, it was very simple. Right. Eat, sleep, work.
So, all right. So, I mean, but at this point, this isn't like you're bumping into somebody in the hallway and giving them a dime bag. Like, at this point, you're showing up someplace with, multiple, whatever, 5-10 pounds of weed, in your trunk and handing it off. I mean, this was like,
yeah, I was doing. At this point, by age 21, I became a millionaire between age 21 and 22 is when I made my first million. And I think that's when I bought a new car. I was like, I had a pawn customer or something that had a dealership, and I bought it all legitimately, but I had the money to do it. And I felt confident where, like, okay, I can kind of show off a little bit. It was nothing. It was a GMC Sierra. It was nothing fancy. But to me, it was nice because I was driving a 15-year-old Pontiac Bonneville with $250,000 in the trunk,
So I wrote a story for this guy named Deveroli, and Deveroli was, a matter of fact, did you see the movie War Dogs?
Yeah, a long time ago. But I don't even remember I don't remember.
War Dogs was these two kids from Miami who started selling weapons to the U.S. government for the Afghan security forces.
Oh, okay. I did see that.
Yeah. So, and Jonah Hill plays Deveroli. Okay. I was locked up with Deveroli. I wrote his memoir. But what's so funny about him is literally he had $4 or $5 million in the bank. He was living in this shitty apartment, driving a 10 or 15-year-old Mercedes. And it was like, and I'm sitting there going, well, when did you buy another car? He's like, he said, I honestly didn't spend any money until after he got indicted. Like, I mean, if you watch the movie, they changed a bunch of stuff. But I mean, he just, to him, the thrill and what he enjoyed was making money. And he didn't live lavishly, and he didn't, and when I compare myself to someone like that, like, I don't think I lived lavishly too, but I had a brand new car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But some guys are just like, I don't know if it's that, I want to say that my mom used to call it, depression mentality, where you always kind of feel like you're broke, like you don't spend money, you save money, that's what you do, like you don't want to spend any money.
I spent money on experiences, just not things. I didn't want any attention on me. I didn't want anybody to be talking about me, like, he has a nice car, he is doing this. So for me, it was always about, like I said, hotel, girls, good restaurants, and that was kind of, my life was based on really experiences and working hard. And
so what were you doing?
Fuck, dude, I worked. That's it. I worked. I was a slave. Like, if I had to get a delivery at 2 a.m. coming out of the border, I would wait. If they say it's going to be there at 9 o'clock and they're like, oh, it's late, I would stay up till 2 a.m., 2:30. I would sit in a freaking parking lot in my Bonneville and just wait until the truck comes. And then I'd make eye contact with the truck. And then if I didn't think the truck was being followed, then I'd have it followed me to an undisclosed location. Because I would always, anytime trucks come from the border, I wouldn't tell them exactly where to go because I wouldn't want them to bring any heat there. I'd have them come, then I'd feel it out. If I liked the situation, then I'd bring them to a place to unload the merchandise.
And this is all. These are all hidden compartments.
It depends on what type of trucks. I mean, it depends on what type of, and what year we're talking about. I ran everything from 18-wheelers to pickup trucks to trailers, that's about it. But the guys that were bringing it to me bring it all different ways, whether it's speedboats, trains, 18-wheelers, a few times a helicopter drop. That was over in Washington. There's so many different ways to get stuff over the border. And it's also, you can just know somebody. What if you know a border patrol guy? It's like, yeah, now's a good time to come through.
Nice. I read an article one time where the Mexicans had a manufacturing plant that were building telephone poles. Those big, like they're like 10, 15 feet round, right? Yeah. They're concrete, but they're hollow in the center, and they packed it full of like coke or meth or whatever it was, and they put them on these 18-wheelers and had the highway patrol. Actually, they came from Mexico. The highway patrol would block of the U.S. blocks off the road and had them escorted them all the way into where they were to the construction company that was supposed to use them, and then they drop them off, and then that night, and it's like 2 or 3 poles at a time, and anyway, they ended up getting busted. But yeah, it's amazing how ingenuitive that smugglers can get with moving this stuff.
Yeah, it's an art form. I mean, if there's money to be made, they're going to figure out a way.
Right.
There's sometimes when loads would come down and they'll send a smaller load to have it get busted, to have all the attention on that load while they bring the main load in.
Right.
And they could even, let's say they have one of their guys that gets busted. They'll be like, hey, yeah, work for him. Give him some information.
Right.
You give them information about the smaller load.
Yeah,
Take that one down, boom. It's just a distraction.
Well, it's like the cartel where they shoot people through the ports of entry. You know, they send 5 of them in there, and then they tip off. There's something in this car. They grab that car, and the other people just go right through.
There you go.
You know, it's just distraction or whatever you want to call it. Sleight of hand. I was gonna say,
it's always exciting though when the package arrives safely.
Right.
You know, that's kind of the rush. That's what you go back for too. It's not only the money, it's that feeling. It's like you can't really get that at a desk job.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, I guess it depends what you're looking for, but that, you know, it's fulfilling. It's because it's something that only you know. It's like it's your secret. Nobody else knows that you just did $1 million deal, and you're here now. You did $1 million deal, you know, an hour ago, and now you're here eating oysters with them.
Listen, I feel like I would be terrified. And what's so funny is like what I did, people were like, are you insane? Like you walked in the bank, gave them fake documents, signed the stuff, got a check, and you weren't worried at all. But I wasn't worried because I knew what the bank was doing. You know, I knew how it worked. I knew what the underwriting was. I knew what all the security measures. So I felt confident. So to me, like meeting some guy in the parking lot, you know, and unloading, you know, 200 pounds of drugs, to me, I'd be waiting for the cop. I'd be waiting for the helicopters to land. I would be, you know, because there's so many people there. There's so much law enforcement that is focused on stopping it. And there's so many people involved in all of the transaction. Anybody down the line could have been arrested, flipped, you know, and then they just followed all the way back to you.
Yeah, you gotta have.
I would have been terrified.
You have to have good gut instincts to really play that game. There's so many times where I've had close calls when I was back in the day where certain people would want to meet me, and I just at the last minute I would just be like, no, I can't.
Right.
You know, it was the right decision. There's not so many times. I should say there were a couple of times. You know, where I just knew I shouldn't meet that person. I know they have heat. You can tell by their demeanor and how they're acting on the phone. Not always, but if you're partying hard, if you're doing drugs and getting hammered all the time, you're not going to be as perceptive to potential threats.
Right.
So most of my partying happened in college and high school, college, and a little bit after that. And then I kind of cut back on all that stuff. It was only rare occasions. I was really focused on my business and basically just being aware of everybody around me and who could be a snitch and who's fucked up. And I was pretty good at it until
the end. No, I was gonna say, intuition. Like I'm a huge believer in intuition. Like sometimes I'll talk to somebody, I can just feel something, you know what I mean? Like, you know, the person's nice and everything, and you're like, something's not right. Or you're like, yeah, the guy's nice and everything, but the truth is this guy can't stand me. You just know it. And everybody's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I could feel it. What do you mean you could feel it? He was cool. He was nice. We were joking. You were saying was good. That guy despises me. I promise you. And later on, of course, it comes out like, yeah, that guy is talking shit. He can't stand you. Yeah. Or even if it's like, you know, you're dating a chick and she comes home and everything's fine and just like normal, but something's wrong.
Yeah,
and you find out 2 weeks later she's, you know, banging her ex-boyfriend, and you're like, fuck, I knew it. I felt it. Couldn't, you know, every time I've ever been caught, every time I've ever had a girlfriend start accusing me of cheating, I was. You know, and I used to always go, you're crazy. The truth is intuition's a motherfucker. Like, you just know. And I didn't do anything different. Yeah. Nothing changed.
There's like this signal. It goes from gut to heart to brain.
Right.
A lot of people think it goes the other way around, like brain, heart, gut. But
you just feel it.
Everything starts in the gut. That's where all your sensations start, and then it moves up from there. And that's, you have to always follow your gut.
Right. What were you dating anybody at this point? Like, were you?
Depends on which years. I always had, from age 25 up till 30, I had a few steady girlfriends. A couple that lived with me 2 years. I had a 2-year relationship and another 2-year relationship. But they didn't really they didn't know what I did. They knew I had money, but they didn't know the volume of money I had because I never kept it all in one place. It was all over. Like there was a time where I had one girlfriend where she was going, we just had a rough time. It was just... She was on a lot of meds. I didn't know this at the time, but she was taking, I don't know, Adderall, Trazodone, Xanax, all these different things, uppers, downers, lefters, righters, whatever. And I'm like, I'm in Manhattan. She's like, we need to get home now. It's like midnight. I was doing a deal in Brooklyn, and she's in Manhattan waiting for me to pick her up, and the deal was taking longer than I thought, and I was waiting on money. I had like over $2 million in cash on me, and over $2 million in cash weighs a couple 100 pounds. You know, a bill is like 0.999 grams. So, granted, it wasn't all 20s, but I have a couple 100 pounds of cash on me.
Right.
And she's like, we need to get home. And I don't usually like to drive really late night on the road with cash. It's usually like my cutoff time used to be like, if I'm with an out-of-state license plate, I'm not on the road after 9 p.m. But if it was in-state, it would be like 10, 11. I don't want to be on the road. And she's like, we need to go home. And I didn't want to go. So I got us a hotel room at the Mandarin Oriental in Columbus Circle. And the bellman comes up. He knew me pretty well there. He's like, can I help you with your luggage? I'm like, okay. I hand him, I go, here's my film equipment or something. I put it on the bell card. It's 200 pounds of cash plus. We get up to the hotel room. She's like, you're crazy. You're a drug dealer. She was going through something. I'm embarrassed to say, you know, I'm not a bad guy, but she was having an abortion. It wasn't like far into it, but whatever. She told me she was on the birth control and stuff, so that's a whole nother story. I don't want to get into that, but yeah, she was threatening me. Like, I thought she was going to call the cops, or the neighbors would have called security the way she was screaming and behaving.
Right.
And I didn't know what to do, because if the cops showed up, what am I going to do with all this cash? And I couldn't just carry it out. It was too heavy, and I didn't have a bell cart.
Right.
And there's no window I could throw the money out. Like, this is all the shit that's going through my head in milliseconds. So where am I going with this? Did you ask me a question? I'm trying to figure out where I'm going with this.
I was saying, are you dating different women?
Oh, wow, I was dating that girl. Yeah, that's for sure, man. And that was a mess. I was dating her, and that was my only girlfriend. I never juggled women. I always had one girlfriend at a time. And if I didn't have a girlfriend, I had to run with escorts because I was too busy. When I worked so many hours that I couldn't hold down a girlfriend. And if I'm in a random city, it's like I'd be working till whatever wee hour of the morning, and at the last minute I would get to my hotel room like I need some company.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say when I was on the run, I dated this chick that was bipolar, and I mean, she would just lose it. It's 2:00 in the morning, she's screaming, and I'm like, we're both wanted. Like, what are you doing? I mean, I like literally grabbed stuff, threw it in a bag, ran down the hallway. And she would go in the hallway and be like, run, that's all you're good for, run. And I was just like, Jesus, go. Run, jump in my car, leave. And then of course she comes down, starts calling, I'm sorry, I love you, please don't leave, I'm sorry. And one time she called and I heard and she's like, oh, hold on, somebody's at the door. I'm like, yeah, the cops are at the door. There's no doubt. Like, she opens it. Sure enough, there's 2 cops there saying, listen, we got some phone calls. What's going on? Like that. So I know exactly what you're saying.
How you described it is exactly the feeling.
And had I been there and the cops showed up at that time I don't know what it is now, but in that time in Charlotte, North Carolina, if they showed up and there was domestic violence, somebody has to go to jail. So I would have had to go, one of us has to go to jail. Like, we can't be fingerprinted, bro. Yeah. This is a bad situation. Then she's insane. And who knows what she'll say. Like, I can't tell you how many times she was like, I make one phone call. It's like, what are you so good? I know. I'm terrified.
I know, dude. That's not healthy.
No.
And that's
a bad position.
Bro, that's why for me to get out of that relationship, that was an art form in itself.
Right.
Because it took me 6 months to get out of it. I had to slowly play that I was broke.
Right.
I had to like so much shit I had to do. I had to play weak and like a loser. Like, you're better than me, like
you can do, you don't need this.
It was very delicate what I had to do. And it was,
I ended up getting this chick an apartment of her own. Like, so she has her own apartment. I'm still getting phone calls at 2 a.m. You got to come pick me up. If you want me to drive, I can drive. No. You're not driving. I'll come get you. I mean, she's a loose cannon.
That game, bro, if you're breaking the law, number one, you can't, in my opinion, I would never want to have children if I was breaking the law.
Right.
And that's why I didn't have kids at a young age, just because I was breaking the law. I wouldn't want to have them be around me. And number two, you got to have a solid girl or none at all.
Yeah.
That's going to wear you down, and it's dangerous.
The kind of chicks that date guys that they know are drug dealers aren't solid like that. Like, it's almost impossible to find that chick, because most women, the moment they kind of realize, like, oh wow, like, I think this guy's a drug dealer, or whatever it is, I think he's committing fraud. I think this guy's a fucking fraud. Like, most chicks are like, look, I don't know what's going on. I'm out of here. Like, they have to have a certain mindset to be okay with it. And if they are okay with it, there's something not quite right.
Yeah.
Like, something, things are gonna go wrong. Like, you can't expect this is the kind of chick that's gonna scream at 2 a.m. periodically. Periodically, she's got a drug problem. Like that's not normal behavior to say, I'm a solid, upstanding citizen, and I do everything right. And my boyfriend or my husband happens to be shipping in 500 kilos of cocaine every month, but he's a nice guy. I mean, we have 2 kids. It's fine. No, something's up with that chick.
Yeah,
something's bad.
It was a good lesson, though.
Yeah.
All my fuck ups have been the greatest lessons. I haven't had to yell since that relationship. Believe me, I haven't yelled in 15 years probably. So I'm thankful for that. Now I don't put myself in those situations.
Well, she'll probably contact you after this.
No, she doesn't even. I don't even know if she's alive, bro. Like her Facebook profile hasn't changed since 2008. Her picture, nothing. Like, I took the picture of her in 2007, I think. I've never heard from her. It's been over a decade. Who knows where she is? I have no clue, but that's hopefully she's well. She was actually a good person. The thing is, you start doing pharmaceuticals and all these things, they can turn you into a different person. Yeah. Like, you don't need that stuff. What you need is to go out into nature and just like reset. Like you whatever. Let's not go there.
So how old are you at this point when you extract yourself from that relationship?
28.
You own a house?
No, I never owned any houses. I owned a lot of different parcels of raw land because it was low maintenance. I had a really low maintenance life. It was just focused on, in that movie Heat where they say never get involved in anything you can't walk away in 60 seconds. Right. And I always remembered that because I remember watching that movie, and I don't know.
That's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, that's one of the best movies, bro. So I that's my life. Like, I could walk away from anything. When I did get popped, well, that's a whole other story. I fled from the feds at 100 miles an hour. I could have totally been gone, but I came back just because I didn't, I was already prepared. I could have got passports, everything I needed, but I'm jumping the gun here with that. So what was your question?
I was just saying, like, when you got yourself out of the situation with that chick, how old were you at that point? Like,
I was 27, 28.
27, 28.
27, 28, and I didn't have another girlfriend after that. I had a few different places. I had an apartment in Soho. I had a house in California. I had a house in upstate New York, and I had a nice girlfriend ish down in the city that didn't bother me. She was just a good girl, right? Like, she was just a nice Vietnamese girl that was well educated, worked hard, started with nothing, made her own money, and never asked me any questions. Literally, I'd never this was before smartphones, so there was no texting. It was just like, call me when you're in the city or something like that. And it was just, I'd hang out. And it was therapeutic because I would just hang out, we'd get a bite to eat, and we'd go home, do our thing, and it was just healthy and relaxing, and I enjoyed that, but it wasn't a real girlfriend. So I didn't have it because she probably had her own thing too. Who knows? We didn't really talk about it, but she was a...
So why you I mean, if you're doing most of this on the East Coast, why the house in California?
Well, so I was pulling out of Canada for about a decade. That's where I obtained most of my product. Right. But then starting around 2007, 2008, California cannabis started really making its way in volume to the East Coast. It always made its way to the East Coast in the early 2000s, like 100 pounds at a time, 200, somebody bring 1,000, whatever, but never where it's just saturated the marketplace, where it was really competing with my Canadian products, and my customers are complaining that my prices were too high. So I had to go out to California in '08 and really scope out the scene and see what this is all about, because I wasn't too familiar with California cannabis. And I went out there and I rented a house as just a headquarters stash house to really just sleep, store some money, and meet with various people that I'd known from my past, and really just see what type of inventory and product was out there with the quality. And I spent several weeks out there scoping it out. And that's when I really started, actually my business was starting to break down a little bit because of the California competition.
Okay.
That was breaking down in 2008. You know, my margins were small, dude. I do $1 million deal. I only might make 60, 80 grand after all expenses.
Yeah. Right.
Which is not a ton for the risk.
I was going to say that's not, not for having to go to jail for a 10-year mandatory minimum. Yeah.
And I was doing it. Sometimes I would do deals where I'd make even less just to keep the customers happy until I figured out a solution to my problem. And the solution was the market's becoming saturated and people are demanding lower prices. My customers that have been with me for over a decade.
Right.
So I had to figure things out, and that's why I had a place in California.
Okay. And so you go down there, you get some connects, and you start moving it across. You're moving it across the country back.
Yeah, I still have my Canadian operation running. Like, mind you, I have 14 cell phones at the time. 2 of them are PGP encrypted BlackBerries. We have our own server. When I got busted, they brought our BlackBerry down to Washington, D.C., tried to crack it. They couldn't even get into it.
Right. Hold on. Do you know what a BlackBerry is?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Half the things that,
So
he's like,
I was in California still running my East Coast and Canadian operation, which was deteriorating in a way. But while I was in California, the goal was to find 1,000 pounds at a good price. But that was really hard depending on what time of year you were in California. I was out there in like 2008, 2009 in the early spring, and things were drying up. They didn't have the surplus of cannabis that they have now 15 years ago. So it was hard for me. I'd have to go to multiple growers. I'd get 50 pounds here, 30 here, 100 here, just to put together an order of 500 pounds. And it was very time consuming, and I had an associate that would help me do that. And I still really wasn't making that much money. I didn't know the biggest player out there. I didn't know the top dog grower that was growing thousands and thousands of pounds. So I was just trying to figure it out. And most importantly, I didn't have good transportation. I wasn't familiar with transporting product from the West Coast to the East Coast. My specialty was transporting along the East Coast. I had a count in every single state between New Orleans and Boston. New Orleans, Florida, Atlanta, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, nothing in Delaware. Don't even know that. Pennsylvania, New York, and Boston. So I had accounts and I had drivers. I had 5 drivers at all times that I could pull from, only like 2 to 3 that I used regularly. And I had tight transportation, really good drivers on the East Coast. But as far as West Coast, that's a huge run. That's like a 40-hour drive or something. What is that? I don't even know. It's a couple days. It's a few days to get from New York to Florida, you can make it in a day, 20 hours straight if you have to stop. But
so how did you get it from there to just?
I had one of my customers, Missy Giovi. She was a female mountain biker. She won several World Cups. She was one of the fastest at one time in the late 90s. And she was a customer of mine that brought product down to New Orleans for a couple years. I would confront her like maybe $500,000 a month. And she's like, baby, anytime you need work, let me know. I'll do extra. So I used her as a driver. I figured I'd have her come up to the northern mountains of California and load her trailer, because I figured if she got pulled over, the cops wouldn't give her a big deal, because downhill mountain biking originated in Northern California.
Okay.
It was really where it was founded and started. So I had her as a driver initially until I solidified a more professional way. And a more professional way was to have a jet fly the cash to California and then a fruit truck to bring the product back. So you get an 18-wheeler, it's full of fruit, and then you put all the cannabis in the middle with the crates.
Right.
And that was what I had in the works. But before that was all solidified, I was just kind of cowboying it, taking shortcuts, working with this mountain biker. I paid her $60,000 to do the drive. And she did it a few times, and then she ended up subbing the drive out to her massage therapist, which I didn't know about, only paid her $3,000 to drive the trailer.
She's probably thrilled to get the $3,000.
Yeah,
maybe she didn't even know what was in there.
Who knows?
I need you to drive my trailer.
She got pulled over for speeding.
She definitely didn't know what was in there.
They put the GPS device right in that trailer.
And let her go?
Let her go, and they delivered it right to my hometown, Saratoga Springs, New York. And so what happened is Missy Giove, the biker, she would fly into New York and jump in the driver's seat of that truck and take over from her massage therapist, so I wouldn't know that there was a massage therapist driving across country.
Right.
I would look like Missy drove the load. And Missy brought me the load one day, and I suspected something was fishy. First off, the truck wasn't even loaded right. It was a Ford F-150 rental truck that there was way too much tongue weight on the back, so the trailer had the headlights of the truck sitting way up, pointing up, because it wasn't weighted properly. So right there, I was like, there's no way this thing made it 3,000 miles without being pulled over. And I was so tired, though, because I was at a concert. I was down at Bonnaroo Music Festival, tripping out, just partying too hard, and I just wasn't alert. And I was tired of weed anyways. I was like half out of the game. I was like, I just want out of this business. I was going to sell it off to somebody, and I didn't like the weed business, so I was taking shortcuts by even dealing with her. But she got the load. I met her in a parking lot. And then I had her follow to one of my personal residence, which I rarely did. I usually would bring her somewhere else, to a piece of property or a stash house or something. But I was just tired and didn't want to deal with anything. So brought her to my house. I opened up the trailer and I just kind of scanned the situation, and I noticed a little wire hanging in the ceiling. And I went up and looked over, and it was a battery pack connected to some device with a red dot, red blinking light. And I knew it was a tracking device. And I just put my fingers up to my mouth. I go, don't say a word. Because I didn't know if she had a wire on. I had no clue what the fuck was going on.
Right.
So I brought her out of the trailer into my house, and I just told her to leave her phone in my kitchen. I brought her up to one of the bedrooms, and I had her open up her shirt, show me she wasn't wearing a wire. She's like, what are you doing? You're acting crazy. And then I looked out my front window out of the curtains, and I saw across about 300, 200 yards out, a Chevy Impala sitting off in the distance, and I knew that trailer was being tracked and followed by the feds.
Was she wired though?
No, she didn't have
any idea.
She had no clue either. The massage therapist dropped the trailer off to her down the road. Missy had no clue either.
So what's funny is that, so I've written a bunch of stories, right, like true crime stories, and one, what you just the black box, the wires, the whole thing. You can literally go to that story, American Narco, about those guys. They were shipping in from Mexico, like concrete tiles. And in the tiles was this metal box with a red light. I was like, a red light? Why would they even have the red light on there? He's like, they pulled it out and they like stomped on it and took off running, and they just panicked, and the feds were had pictures of them and everything, and a couple days later they came and arrested both of them. But it's funny, the shipping it across the country. Like I wrote a story about a guy who they would, and I guess this is pretty common, where they would buy a car at the auction, and they just stuff the car, and then they pay a legitimate trucker to load the car on the thing and take the car and drop it off somewhere. Like this legit, so if he gets pulled over, he's like, and the cops search it and they find something, he's like, I didn't know it was on there. We charged $350 to move cars. Like, I got 8 cars on this thing.
Yeah.
So that happens sometimes, and sometimes they'll do it and they'll put a device in and let it keep going just to figure out. That's common. But man, bro,
stupid mistake, bro. And I had a good run. At this point in the game, I had done well over 300 million in sales easily.
So, well,
by the time this truck pulled up with Missy,
right?
I was very good at what I did. I was a ghost. Nobody knew I existed. Like, there's a lot of big players out there, but usually they have heat on them within 2 to 3 years if you're operating at my scale.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of guys that'll have windows where they'll run 2, 3, 4 months of the year, and they'll do some 1,000-pound loads, and then they'll take off to leave the country for 6 months and have a nice vacation, come back. But consistently working week after week for a decade plus at my scale doesn't really happen. unless, especially without a gun and especially without the feds knowing.
Right.
Because the feds know of all the big stuff going on. It's just certain things they let go and certain things they don't, because they like to follow things to just kind of see how everything works.
Well, I mean, I've ordered stuff before where they came in, investigated. Actually, there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
Like they actually have a case. Like they probably had a case, and then they just kind of said, and they just kind of go away for a year or so, and kind of just watch, and then come back. And even though it's like, well, why didn't they bust them back then? We had other stuff to do, or like you said, it was, there was no reason. It wasn't enough to do anything about it right this second. We didn't have everything we really needed for a solid enough case.
Yeah.
And then they just walk away and let them go for a little bit, and they come back and bust them for, they build up the case, and now you've got 5 years or 2 years or 3 years, and now you're really got some problems because they, in the federal system, is ghost dope. They don't even have to catch you with the drugs. So here's what I'm wondering is how much weight was in the trailer that they got you with. How long had they? Because that sounds like that's just a fluke.
Yeah, this was just a small load. There was only like 300 pounds in that trailer. It was like, the end of the season.
That's small.
Well, back. Okay, so yeah. Well, I was doing.
Right.
I needed 1,000 pounds in that load, and there was only 300 that came. So that's that. It was hard to get product that time of year back then. So.
So when
there's so I closed the trailer back up, and when I knew she didn't have a wire on, I knew it got pulled over somewhere across country. I just knew. I just didn't know all the details. So I had her follow me out of there, and I basically picked up my phone. Once I got a mile from my house, I saw agents packed in cars lined up. There were about 20 of them in 6 different cars, and I saw them as I was driving out of the neighborhood, and.
Did they not know you were leaving, or
they didn't know? They didn't even know my name. They're just doing an investigation.
Okay.
They're literally trying to figure out who's who and where's this load going that we found in the middle of the country driving down the highway. So they're doing their homework, and I pick up my burner phone. I call her. I go, "Yep, we're not filming today. It's really cloudy out," because she's like a pro mountain biker, and I was a little bit in the film industry.
Right.
So. And then I made it out of my neighborhood, and I just saw a flock of them back about a half mile just following. And then a little bit later, I saw there was a plane that was circling above that was a part of their crew too.
Right.
And when I got a couple stop signs up, I took a left, and I redlined it, bro. I freaking hammered on it, and I had several cell phones in my cup holders. I started breaking them apart, ripping the batteries out, was throwing one piece at a time every quarter mile out the window, redlining it the whole way, nervous as fuck, not thinking clearly, like, what's the play? What am I going to do? I still got $1.5 million cash sitting back at the house. I got that load on the road. I got 3 other loads that are coming to me being delivered within the next 3 hours because I was out of town for a week. So Missy was the first load, and I had 2 others from Canada and then another domestic one coming that day. And I have cell phones beeping everywhere. Half still are at the house. Some are with me. So I'm like, this is like right in the middle of a busy day for me to happen.
Right.
And I'm like, fuck.
Well,
and the first thing I do is, what do? I call my stepfather, which he knows nothing about my illicit business, but he's always the guy that was there for me as a kid when I had to go to the hospital, right? Just get stitches or whatever.
Right.
So instinctually, I call him. I go, I need to see you right now. So he goes, where are you? He goes, I'm at work. What's the problem? I go, don't worry about it. I'll see you. I'll be down there. So I drove a half hour to his work. And got to a red light about a mile later, and I saw a couple DEA guys, couple cars back, and they were onto me. I was like, fuck. So at this point, they obviously ran my license plate. They're running GPS on my personal phone, which I haven't gotten rid of. I kept my personal. And I also have, what was it called? OnStar? Oh, yeah. I used to have the OnStar. I had the OnStar in the car. So they could have been tracking that by now, too. Who knows? I don't know how fast they were moving. But once I got on the highway, though, I created kind of a clusterfuck of traffic. There was a 3-lane highway, and I had 2 18-wheelers, one in the far left lane, one in the middle lane. They were side by side. And then I went to the far left lane, and I was running in tandem with them down the highway. And this kind of backed up traffic behind us so nobody could pass for maybe a couple minutes.
Right.
And once I had a clusterfuck of traffic and I saw the DA was about 6, 7, 8 cars back, I then creeped up a little bit, got in front of the 18-wheelers, and then I punched it, doing 100. Lost them because they're probably not going to be able to get through that traffic for a good 2 minutes. And then got off the highway. Hadn't seen him for about 20, 30 minutes. Had a conversation with my stepfather. Go, here's the deal. I'm going to get arrested. There's a few $100,000 in a picnic basket in your basement. Can you do me a favor? Grab that, save it for me, and get me an attorney. He's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, he has no clue. He thinks I'm just like...
You put him pools. What are you doing?
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
No clue. And, and I'm like... But he kept cool. He didn't even like flinch. Yeah. He was just like, he's seen probably a lot of shit. He's watched a lot of movies as a kid, right? So he's just like, okay, so that's it. Then I'm leave him. I go, what do I do now? For $60,000, I can get a passport, get out of the country. I got enough money stashed in other places where I can live comfortably forever.
Right.
But I'm on the run then. That's no more life. The life I know is done. Well, not that I really had one. I didn't have kids, which is good, right? So that was kind of a viable option in a way. But then I'd have to always be, I would always be watching. I wouldn't want to deal with that shit. So then I kind of just said, it's time to go back. I'm going to drive home. So I drove home. And for some reason, I decided to stop at the gas station and fill up with a tank of gas because I just felt like before I go to meet the enemy, I wanted to have a full tank of gas. Right. I have just too many movies, right?
All right.
So, and as I'm pumping the gas, they rush up to me. Down on the ground, down on the fucking ground. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I almost peed my pants. I didn't see him coming. I thought I was going to meet him at my house.
Right.
So, but actually some trooper saw me. They probably had it on the radio everywhere. Look for this truck, right? So some trooper found me. I found out at a later date. My buddy actually knew the trooper, but brought me back to the house, cuffed me up, had me sit outside my house where about 20 plus agents swarmed my house, asked them to get inside. What's in there? Anybody in there? Any guns? I just said, I'm sorry, what's going on? I wish I could help you, but I can't help you if I don't know what's going on.
All right.
And that's all I said. I need to speak to a lawyer.
Yeah. And that shuts them up.
That shuts them up, yeah. And then they were talking to the other driver, Missy, which was running her mouth like crazy. I found it at a later date. Like, fuck, dude. I was like, she was just blaming, like, not a good situation. Right. Not a good situation. I've heard a lot of stories about what she put us in a sticky situation, to be honest. And what's tough about it is she's getting a lot of fame for, like, because I don't know if she's told the whole truth, because she was somewhat of a celebrity back in the day, but for being the fastest in the country as a female mountain biker. She got into the Hall of Fame, but she's really...
So instead of saying, like, I don't know what's going on, she's saying, I've been doing this for 6 months.
I don't know exactly what she told them at that moment. I just know she talked.
Right.
And then I also know she sat down with him a few months later and told on a lot of people.
Right.
And she didn't get any time.
But
she owed me $300,000, and she...
I'm sure
it's fine. It's fine. She did what she did.
Have you asked her about it?
No, dude, I never saw her again. I don't even want to go near her because then it could be like she could put in a situation where I'm trying to kill her.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I don't even want to be. She has some other legal cases with people that are like in relationships with her going on where she's said stuff, domestic abuse that I heard aren't true. I have no clue. It's none of my business, but I stay away.
Right.
Better that way. She cost me a lot of money, bro. But the way I look at it, if I didn't go down that way, it would have been something else. I had to learn the lesson one way or another. You learn a lot when you hit the bottom, you know?
Oh, yeah. You figure out who your friends are. You figure out, like I was thinking, you're thinking you get a passport. Yeah, you could get a passport, but you could have then lived for the next 15 years and then been picked up by just some coincidence. Some guy that knew you is in South America and recognizes you and calls the police, and you've built a whole new life, and you're like, damn, then you get yanked up and you go to jail for 10 years or 15. Like, you know, the idea that you're going to just disappear nowadays, man, that's tough. That's tough.
Especially with all these facial recognition cameras.
But I mean, even if you have all the right documents, you know, like
plastic surgery.
Yeah, I've had plastic surgery.
Multiple.
When I was on the run, multiple plastic surgeries. Even when they grabbed me, the feds had pictures of me, the old pictures, and they were like, and one guy is behind the lead agent going, I don't think it's him, bro. And you know, he's like, I don't think it's him. He's like, no, it's him. Look at his eyes. It's him. It's him. You know, I'd lost weight. I had a nose job. I had a facelift. I had 2 hair transplants. Had my teeth done. bro. I went all out. I'm telling you, like, and the same thing. It's just, the problem is it's always the fly in the ointment. You could do everything right, and somebody else makes a mistake or bumps into you, and you're like, damn, I had it all lined up. You can't account for everything. Which is exactly what you're saying is like, something would have happened. Like, what if they caught you what if they'd been watching you for 18 months and then said, okay, and then and the load they cut you with is 1,000 pounds. And then the guy they grab say, man, I've been dropping off, I don't know how much is in the truck, but I think it's around probably whatever this is, 1,000 pounds. I've been dropping that off twice, every 2 weeks for the last 18 months. And they add that up and your mandatory minimum's 20 years. It could be so much worse.
Law enforcement often questions him, not because he's suspected of a crime, but because they find him fascinating. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
I paid them $10 million in gold bars, right?
No, this is what I'm waiting for, because I saw that on the other thing where you got locked up, and then you were locked up almost, a year and a half, 2 years, and then your lawyer comes to you, and you didn't believe that was even going to be possible.
Yeah, for a while, it was, how it works. They just want you to work for them.
Yeah.
So they wanted me to work for them, and I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'd rather die. It's like I told myself that coming in, I'll die before I do that. It's just like I've faced death as I had a troubled childhood, so where I almost jumped. So I was never afraid to die. It was when I was a teenager, there was a time when I stood at the edge and I was like, I don't want to live this anymore, this life. And that's actually when I decided to selling weed. I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna make my own money.
Right.
That's in the book. By the way, my book, right? You know about the book, right?
Yeah.
Pressure. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, and I'll put the links in the whole thing.
Cool,
I'll do the whole thing.
So, they wanted me to work for them, and I wouldn't do it. And I got bailed out. And you know why I was bailed out? Because they wanted to follow me around.
Right.
See who I know, because they knew nothing about me. They didn't even know my name when I got arrested. And that's how I knew they didn't have a case. What's your name? What are you doing here? Right there, I knew they didn't have a case.
Right.
So, they wanted to follow me around. And they did follow me around for a bit. Specifically, there was a 60-day slot where they had like a tight crew on me day and night, bro. They know what you eat for breakfast. Just trying to get a good case on me, because they didn't have a good case on me. They searched my house illegally that day. They came back and because I didn't unload anything from the trailer. When I saw that GPS unit, I didn't unload anything. I told her to get out of here. Right. So there was no probable cause to go in my house, but they went in anyway and found 1.5 mil and some few other pounds of weed. So I went for them. I was bailed out, watched me for a year and a half. My lawyer kept pumping me for money, bro. I was into, between him, the investigator, I was into for close to $700,000 for legal fees, bro. And they just and I hadn't even got a trial yet. Right. This is like pre-trial, $250,000. Oh, Eric, I'm gonna need another $100,000. It's taking longer than we thought. I'm gonna need another $200,000. And he knew he could do it. Michael Kennedy, he's passed away now, but he knew what he was doing. He knew my life was in his hands, and I'm just a young kid, bro. I'm 30. He's a 70-year-old. He's dealt with the mobsters, the pizza connection. He's done tons of shit. He knew what he was doing. So anyway, he wouldn't take cash, so I had to get him a check. The only way I could get him a check is I had to launder the money. Right. So I got rearrested a second time. They put me for laundering money to pay my legal fees. I wasn't breaking the law or anything else. I wasn't dealing anymore. I was done. I was like, I got arrested, number one. I'm going to beat this case, and I'm done. I'm going to stay clean.
But you're laundering drug money to pay.
I had to pay my lawyer. Supposedly, I was never convicted of that, but they said I was laundering money to pay my lawyer. So they rearrested me. All right. This time, no bail. I'm sitting in there for like county jail sucks, dude. It's not like federal time where it's county jail is like you sit in a room all day, no sunlight, just eat shitty food. And I'm in there for four plus months, and every week my lawyer's like, Eric, it's time to just cooperate. Because my lawyer was against cooperating from day one. Italian, they don't deal with any clients that cooperate.
Yeah, they all say that.
So he came to me after 4 months. He's like, listen, the goal is to get you out of here right now. He's like, you don't really need to work for him. Just tell him something so you get out. And I'm just like, no, I'm not doing that.
Okay.
And then eventually he comes to me a few weeks later, or a month later, or 2 months later, and he's like, hey, Eric, they know you're a good kid. You can get on with your life. Just give them the rest of your money and they'll let you go. And I'm like, I don't even know how do I trust? Can we get it in writing? No, you can't buy your way out of jail. You can't get it in writing.
What you get is the we'll consider it substantial assist. We'll consider it
Cooperation.
Yeah. We'll consider, like, it's totally up to them. Totally up to them.
So I went out in shackles. I made a deal with them. After a while, I was like, listen, yeah, I'll make a deal. I'll give you $5 million. They wanted like 10 or something, 8, 9. And I said, I'll give you 5. And we agreed on like 5.25 million. They didn't like that number. They were just fucking. One investigator he was very good at what he did. He didn't like that number, but we agreed on it. So I went out in shackles, escorted by dozen DEA, ATF with AR-15s into the woods of upstate New York. They had no clue where I was taking them. They didn't know if it was going to be an ambush or what.
Yeah, that's what they're thinking.
They had to be prepared. And I went and I dug up. Actually, the first dig, I only dug up $2 million in gold bars in my mom's backyard, and I gave that to them. That $2 million plus the already $2.5 million they had in cash seized from my houses equaled the $5 million that I agreed to pay. So I was there. But then after that, I paid up. They put me back in jail. I'm told my lawyer, I'm like, listen, I paid.
What am I doing here?
And then we sit down, we have a conversation. I have to, basically, my lawyer's like, you have to sit down and tell them what you did, but you don't have to tell them everything. Just can't lie.
Right.
So I sit down, tell them what I did, blah, blah, blah. I did this for 10 years. They already knew it all anyways by now. And then at the end of the conversation, like, so how much gold did you buy? How much do you have? And right now I'm thinking, fuck. I told them a lot. And then the whole room got tense because they want more gold now. I only gave them $5 million. I mean, they want the big thing. And the conversation just stopped. They put me back in jail, which I should have been let out, in my opinion. I made the deal. We did the deal.
Right.
So my lawyer kept calling me for the next 3 weeks. Eric, do you want to give them anything else? Is there anything else you can do for them? And finally, I was just like, fuck it. And I went out. And another day, it was pouring rain. They took me out of prison. Went another spot up in the woods in upstate New York. And I dug up another $6 million in gold bars about 3 feet down with shackles on. There's pictures of it if you go online and Google it. But me in handcuffs. My hands are so pale and white from sitting in a cell with no sunlight. Like it's...
Well, so you hadn't been sentenced yet, though.
No.
So you were still in the U.S. Marshals holdover.
There you go.
Okay, but they're going to charge you. They're just going to consider it for a reduction and not give you what you should have gotten, right? Like, so you
that's my cooperation,
right? So you would have gotten the mandatory minimum, which would have been what, 10 years, right?
Well,
would it have been 10?
No, it would have been 5, but they probably would have hit me with 10 to 15 based on. So they probably would put some other charges on me. I only had a 1-count indictment at that moment.
Okay, yeah, okay. So they got like 300. What, 200 pounds? 300 pounds. 300 pounds.
Yeah.
So they got 300 pounds. I didn't know. I thought that was the 10 years. Everybody always
10 years is 1,000 kilos.
Oh, you're right. Because Kerry got caught with like 1,100. Well, he got caught with 1,100 pounds, I think, or 2,200 pounds. I forget. Anyway, it was a lot.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's why he got 10. His and this other guy. That was 10. But you still got sentenced.
Eventually, yeah. After my lawyer's like, all right, they're gonna get. After I paid, now they have close to 12 million in my between cash and gold. Then they finally let me out. My lawyer's like, just sit tight. We'll push off the sentencing as long as possible so it doesn't look like you bought your way out of jail. And I just sit
my way out of jail.
Yeah, fuck man. I sit tight, and I ended up getting sentenced down like a year later plus, and I ended up doing 2 years. 30 months, but I got the good time and stuff. And some other things I put in the book, how I got out. I only ended up doing like 20 months. And basically, I paid all that money so I wouldn't have to work for them. And someday, I'm going to be honest with you, there's days, and I think about, did I do the right, would they have all done it for me?
No.
I paid motherfucking close to 12 million so I wouldn't tell on people I'll never see again that really have nothing going on in their lives.
Yeah.
That probably, if I told them, they probably wouldn't even have heard them. I'm so like, I wrestle with that sometimes, to be honest with you. I really do, because because that was expensive for me, and
those people are going to get busted anyway. But listen, everybody you were dealing with has probably been busted and gone to prison anyway.
You know what? That's what fucking happened.
Yeah.
I remember looking in the newspapers this years past, and I'd see, oh, this guy, holy shit, indicted. This guy indicted.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I wrote a story about a guy that got arrested, didn't tell on the other two guys because they got him for one crime. The FBI knew these two guys had helped him with another robbery, so he didn't say anything. He said, "I know not to say anything." So I just took the whatever it was, 11 or 12 years, and just took it. I was like, "You're a fucking idiot." He said, "Yeah, well, you know what happened? They end up busting these guys for that crime without his help. These guys immediately turn on him. They re-indict the guy in prison who didn't talk." They re-indicted him. He got something like 13 more years, and he's now doing like 24 years in federal prison for not cooperating against the two guys that immediately cooperated against him. And that just happens. Like people, they think that code, you don't do it, and you don't, God, man, I've seen it go bad so many times.
The main guy I didn't want to tell on was the guy that actually told that I had the gold, man. That was a freaking really hard pill to swallow, bro. So I'm not going to even get into names. I don't want to do any of that, but like it was just
right. But so you didn't tell them about they already did. They just knew about the gold.
Somebody else had told them about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you just said went and decided here I'll go do it, but they knew.
But they knew I had gold. They didn't know exactly how much, but they figured it all out eventually. Because I was very good at not talking when I was in the game for years, but all it takes is one time. Yeah. Just one guy I just told, I got these gold bars. Check them out. It's like I fucked myself, honestly. I was a young kid. I was a young kid with too much money.
So how old were you when you got out?
Like 34 maybe. 34, 35.
And how long ago was that?
2014.
So did you write your book while you were locked up?
No, I was working on this other application. It was like a piece of software that helps you surround yourself with like-minded people. I was doing the wireframe for that and the design, and kept me occupied. And then when I got out of prison, I had 5 years supervised release, and during that time I started writing the book, and just finished the book. It just came out a year ago. It's gone pretty good. I got distracted though. Like I had an opportunity to be interviewed by Rolling Stone, and I didn't even take the interview because I was in this field. I invested in I was involved in a cannabis farm in New York State. There's no cell service there during the day. And I didn't get back home till the day later. It's like when you don't jump on something like that, it's like you lose it. And I lost the momentum with the book release in some manners, but whatever. I'm happy. I got a good book. It worked hard, but I could have pushed it a little hard. I didn't take every interview that came my way. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, for example, I don't know, a month or two ago, somebody from VH1 reached out to a publicist that I was working with and said, hey, we want to get him on our VH1 crime series show. Yeah. And I didn't.
My True Crime Story.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't follow through with that because I didn't know if it would be a good fit for me. Like, because I'm thinking if I do that, might it prevent me from getting a better deal, maybe a deal with like a Netflix or something down the road? I don't know. It's torn. Because if once the story's already
working on it, getting something, or you were just waiting for it to fall out of the sky?
Fuck, man.
Because I waited a couple of years for it to fall out of the sky, and it just
doesn't happen.
No, it's not that it doesn't happen. It's that you get contact. I know you've already had producers contact you, right?
Yeah.
Want to talk to you, and you take the meeting, and they're going to talk to Jim, and they're going to get their team together. You know how many times I've heard, I'm going to bring this back to my team? I swear to God, I want to jump through the fucking screen every time I hear it. They're like, okay, well, I'm glad we had a good talk, and I've read your synopsis, and I read this, and so I'm going to bring this to my team. Okay, well, that's the kiss of death.
So what's your advice? Should I take the VH1 thing? Just do it?
I would do why not do it? Like to me, listen, I did it.
Oh, okay.
Listen, here's my only problem with the VH1 thing that I did. Obviously, listen, they can't tell. First of all, you're talking about an hour program. You're looking at them doing maybe 41 minutes on you. My problem was, what's the chick's name? Nikki somebody who does the narration for it. It's all hype. It's all flash. It's about redemption. So it's a cutesy little program. It's not a big deal, but you don't know who's going to see that. Like, your story could be done by a polished director and production company, and it could be phenomenal. It could be amazing. This is a silly little rendition that's 40 minutes long. You're maybe 15 or 20 minutes of it. Most of it's narration with some reenactments. It's silly. My only real problem with it was they put so much makeup on me. I was infuriated.
You couldn't tell them to not put it on you?
I should, because they kept saying, no, it's going to look good. You know, I know it looks like a lot now, but on camera, it looks perfect. And, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, they're professionals. It doesn't look good on camera. It looks horrible. So, you know, but listen, they fly you out. They'll give you, you know, whatever, a few $1,000s, or whatever you negotiate. You know, I'll tell you, you know, what I got, you know, which probably wasn't much, but, you know, but they also interviewed my girlfriend and another friend, and, you know, we got to go to New York and hang out for a few days, and it was cool. But somebody could see that. Somebody at Netflix or one of these production companies sees that and goes, listen, you know, I saw that, and they'll know, look, it's hokey. Like, they're going to be like, look, you've got a story here. They can't do your story justice in 40 minutes. You know it and I know it. They'll cut it down to just a couple little hype events. But if somebody comes in and says, hey, your story's a 3-part series of an hour, this is a 3-hour or 4-part series on Netflix, then they come in and they do a real documentary on it. Maybe that documentary ends up doing well, and the next thing you know, you've got Warner Brothers coming in saying, we want to do a movie, or we want to do a series. We think you've got a whole series. Yeah. You're in your early 20s doing all this with DEA watching you and guys getting busted around you. Like, this could be not Breaking Bad, but something along those lines, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, to me, it's like, you know, oh, I don't want to get overexposed. Like what? Like Nike? Like, I mean, what do you mean overexposed?
Yeah, like, somebody told me that. That was the publicist that I was working. She mentioned that, so I kind of took it to heart. But whatever, maybe I'll follow through. When I get out of this interview, I'll give a little jingling and call them up, see if they.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely. I was gonna say, yeah. Another thing, and you know, he'll keep all that. Like, this is another thing that you might want to think about. Just, you know, is that, like, you have a book. Do you have a synopsis of the book? Like a very
the website
short...
really has it all.
What, a synopsis?
Yeah, it's on the website.
How many words is it? Do you know? Like
under 1,000.
Under 1,000 words? Oh, okay, so it's like a summary. I was gonna say, because a lot of times you can pitch. If you have like a synopsis, is better to pitch like let's say 800 word, or sorry, 8,000 to 10,000 word synopsis of your story is probably better than handing someone the book.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because they hand it, like, people are like, they're like, man, you know how many books I get handed? Like, I can't be reading.
Exactly.
You know, this is 10 or 12 hours.
I'm burnt out though. I can't write anything. Maybe we'll talk about that off camera. I'm burnt out. I can't even read my book for an audiobook. So I don't want, the words will make me nauseous. I just spent too much time on it. I'm all done. Like, I'm not. Maybe I'll revisit doing an audiobook in a year or something.
Right.
The book launch I could have done a little better with, but good news is the story's done, so now I'm on to new stuff. You know, it's like that phase of my life, that whole 20-year stretch of selling grass and going to prison and supervised release and writing the book. It's like done. Story's done.
So where first, my question is, what security level did you go to?
Well, I was moved around. I tested out everything. I was in MDC Brooklyn for like a month, a few jails, but I ended up in a low,
right,
at MC Devon's, right? Because nonviolent offender, it's just cannabis.
Yeah.
They're not going to do anything to me. So I was like in a camp, basically. MC Devon's, you know, they have that satellite camp there. So it's basically just a big room, big warehouse with a bunch of bunk beds.
Right.
That's it.
So you got out. Did you have go in any halfway house?
No.
That's nice.
Straight out to 5 years supervised release. They didn't cut me loose, though. Did you go into a halfway house?
Yeah, I wish I had. I mean, honestly, like, if I had money set aside where I was getting out to something, I would have just stayed in prison. I would have stayed in the low, because the halfway house was worse than being in the low. Yeah. But I needed to go because I needed to save up money. I didn't have any money, so I needed that 7 months, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like anybody packed up my clothes and stuck them in boxes waiting for me. Like, you know, my stuff was gone. I started with nothing. Yeah. So what are you doing now?
Right now I partnered up on a cannabis farm in New York State, but the market's just so flooded, so I want to get out of that immediately. That's my top priority, is to try to get out of that business. And then I want to get into building really high-end retreats, infrared saunas, cold plunges, outdoor gyms, fire-to-table food, copper grounding beds, really natural surroundings and environments. So I want to build a place where people can go and reset and recharge. My premise is basically that we plug our phones into charge at the end of the day. We plug our cars into charge, but the human body isn't being plugged into dwellings that charge us. So I want to build these spaces where you can go and recharge for adults only. So that's really my passion, what I'm working on. So I have to get out of the cannabis first, and then I'm going to move into that.
Okay. Well, what happened to your to the fountains and?
I haven't done that in years. I'll build that at the retreat. I haven't. That was a little kid project. I built some nice ponds on my property though. I have some 20-foot spring-fed, 20 feet deep spring-fed koi ponds. I swim in and stuff with the fish. They're huge. They're like this. They're big, and they'll outlive me. Some of those koi can live up to 100 years old.
Oh, where are you living?
I have a place in upstate New York.
You didn't drive here from New York.
No, but I spend part of the winter down here because I have a small little network down here where I'm helping with that's basically going to help me with the retreats.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything we didn't get to?
Well, the title of the book's Pressure, a memoir by Eric Canori. If anybody buys it and likes it, please DM me if there's anything that they like about it.
Leave a review.
Oh, I love reviews if I can get those too. If anybody knows anybody in the film industry that's really passionate and good at what they do, I'll give a finder's fee to somebody that puts me in the right hands with somebody that's good at that. Crime doesn't pay, I guess. Fuck, that's...
What are the other shows, the other podcasts that you've done? Like, is that their angle of? I get a lot of guys that I mean, bear with me one more minute. I get a lot of guys that come on, and they don't want to talk about what got them to prison. They just want to say, so I messed up and I was selling coke and I was selling this and I made a mistake and I got busted and I got 10 years. I went to prison, but then I changed my life and I did this and I did that, and it's like, whoa, wait. How did you get to prison? Yeah, it was just a bad situation, but then I went to prison. It's like they want to talk about, they want their whole story to be about redemption. And there's a lot of podcasts out there, and a lot of guys just focus on, I'm a changed person. It was a bad time. They do this whole thing, and it's like, so I've talked to people who are they do that, and then sometimes I'm like, yeah, let's go back, and they almost they don't want to talk about what got them to prison. And I was wondering, what's it like to be on one of those shows? I
haven't been on one of those shows, and plus I don't really would talk about what I'm like now. I mean, prison, you know how prison is. It helps you grow, right? It's a great time to pause. Somebody should build prison retreats. People would probably pay to go to those. A weekend in prison, you go, no cell phone, no outside visitors, and you just sit in a concrete room for, a weekend, and you can't talk to anybody. You have to figure your life out. So many people complaining out here that they have a tough life. I mean, you don't have a tough life. You're out eating Cheetos, drinking wine every Friday.
Listen, he's heard me say the exact same thing. You know how good it is out here? You've got cell phones, you've got YouTube, you've got Netflix. You can eat whatever you want. You have until you've been stripped of everything, and the guards are talking to you like you're just a dog, and honestly, you don't know how good it is. I can never get upset.
We should be blessed in a way that we had that opportunity to stop us.
Oh, I think it fundamentally altered the person I am. I'm absolutely not even close to, I'm still an arrogant prick. But the difference is now I kind of know. The difference is now I feel bad for the people that have to deal with me. Where before it was just you're lucky to be around me. And now when I'm talking to somebody, I realize, you're kind of being a douchebag. I'm kind of I step back and then I'm oh man, I try and kind of I start to realize, okay, you're being a douche. You need to calm down. You just stop. And then I kind of, like you said, I kind of reset and say, hey, what's going on? Sorry about that. I that. And where I never did that before prison. I would have never done that.
Yeah.
And then in writing too, like I think writing like so helps you lay out a plan.
Yeah, writing my book was the bare minimum. It helped me with my childhood. That's the trauma from there, and just process who I am. Because every person that you look at, when you're having a conversation with them, you have to see the 7-year-old child in them. Because 90% of who we are is programmed between age 1 and 7.
Okay. Yeah.
That's so. Writing that book really helped me understand why I am who I am and where I came from in those years, and what the environment I was exposed to really created this. You can't, when everybody else was playing t-ball and basketball, I'm sitting here watching Miami Vice at age 12,
right.
Trying to figure out how to not get busted by the feds with this 100 kilos of coke, right? Like, how's he going to do it? And don't be stupid and start talking, going out to the club with 5 girls. And I'm like learning all these moves while the other kids are learning how to get to third base.
Yeah.
And
they're playing Atari and you're trying to,
yeah. That was just the environment I grew up in. And, I don't know if I have regrets, but I don't know. My life, I'm thankful for what I have, because it is. If you're stripped naked of everything you have and you feel at least healthy and decent, you're in a good place.
Right.
Right. You have to, especially now I'm getting ready to start another company. Like, it's not about what I have, it's about who I am. Like, I can move and I'm strong and healthy where I can handle the pressure that's going to come with running a company. Because I know what it's like. You need to be able to handle fucking bullshit every day and night. And I've kind of groomed myself to get ready for that again. So
yeah, I definitely, the childhood thing, like until I went to prison, if somebody asked me like, oh, well, why'd you do all that? I would just say, I needed the money, man. I just needed the money. But then I went to prison and I started writing, and I started reading books about how to write a memoir, and how to write nonfiction. And then you kind of start having to look back at your life and say, what influenced me to do these things? Because what shocked me was that Connor, if Connor needed money, you know what he's not going to do? He's not going to go commit fraud. He's not going to go sell drugs. He's going to get an extra job. He's going to get like most people, they don't do it. I always say most people will commit a crime in the right circumstances, but most people will take all of the extra steps before they get there. My first thought is fraud. What? I'm broke. I need some money. There's fraud. Like, that's the first thing I think of. How do I get away with committing some fraud so I can get some money? And so I kind of, when I was writing my book, I started looking back and saying, well, what is it in your childhood that made you think that was even an option, a first option? And it's the same thing, like you said, like obviously something in your childhood, was shaped you to say, hey, what are the things that I can do to make money? And morality didn't really enter into it. Like, that's not really a part of it. It's what do I need to do to make money? It doesn't matter if it's illegal.
Most people commit crimes. They're just to what degree? It's like, most people, there's so many people in your neighborhood that don't have a trash service, and they'll just take their trash to another public dumpster behind a grocery store and dump their trash.
Yeah,
that's illegal. They'll buy an appliance from the store and then use it for a party and then return it 30 days later or something. Say it was defective. That's illegal, right? Like, everybody's breaking crimes. They're committing crimes all the time. I like to think of my crime as the most honest crime you could commit. I like to smoke weed. There's no other place to get it. Well, there's a lot of places to get it, but I like to smoke weed, and I sold it.
Just people helping people?
Yeah, I was not trying to hurt anybody.
All right.
And here it is. It's legal now.
I was going to say my mom used to break every single day. She broke the law because she had all of her medications, and she had one of those week-long planners for pills, and she popped it open, and she would take it out of one container and drop it into Monday and put 3 or 4 pills in a container and close it. You just committed a federal crime. By removing those out of a marked, they have to stay in the prescription bottle until you ingest them. If you take them and place them into another bottle, especially if you commingle them, you've committed a federal crime. So every day she's putting them all in there and taking those pills, and that's a crime. Like most people, there was that book that was written, A Felony a Day. They talk about all the felonies that people commit on a daily basis and don't even think about it. So I mean, everybody's committing, doing something wrong at some point, or cheating on their taxes. Like,
Yeah,
how
that's
many
a big
people,
one.
People are okay with that. Like almost everybody's okay with cheating in some way on their taxes, just a little bit.
Well, even the people that busted me cheated. The bottom line, they wouldn't have had me if they followed the law.
Right.
That in that particular case, in the case that I was popped in, if the law was followed there, I wouldn't have been pinched in that particular moment. Like, they jumped the gun. Whatever, they're gonna do it. I have no hard feelings. It is what it is. It's better that I got popped sooner than later, because now I'm young still. I can rock and roll in the legit world, right? So there's a lot of those guys in the prison there in their 60s and 70s. It's like when they get out,
What are they gonna do?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Bummer. What a bummer to leave it on. All right, let's.
No, we don't want to leave it like that. Fuck. Shit, if I was 70 getting out of prison, fuck, I'd go to the Mahi. I'd go to, where would I go? Bora Bora? I don't know.
Yeah,
just kidding. All of you guys getting out in your 70s, you guys have a good time.
Guys are going to get out and go walk right into a bank and rob a bank so they can go right back to prison because they're 70 years old. And you know how many guys I knew were like, they're going to get out at 60, 70, nothing. They have nothing.
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
Imagine you don't even know if you don't even have like Social Security. Like you never paid in.
I wish the judges, that's one thing. I feel like the judges, in order to become a judge, you should have to do like a prison time for a month and then supervised release. Because what was, yeah, I got a 2-year sentence or whatever, but that was 8 years of my life that I, with the pretrial, 5 years of supervised release, peeing in a cup, like all that, it just prevent. And then on top of it, I'm a felon, so there's certain things I can't do now for the rest of my life. Yeah. Like it's.
So could you imagine if every federal judge before they took the bench had to do 60 days as a normal inmate? You can't say you're a federal judge. You go in, boom, that's it. Listen, do you know how different the sentences would be and the prison system would be? Because they would have so much more empathy for inmates. And I'm not saying it should be nice.
Yeah, it shouldn't be nice, but they could have. I learned my lesson. If I did a year and then a year of supervised release, like I wasn't going to go back to breaking the law. Yeah. Me personally. I don't know if that's with everybody else, but for me personally, bro, I learned my lesson.
13 years? You could have given me a couple years. I'm good. I got it. I got you.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Thank you. 13 years. I had to do 13 years. Fuck. Yeah,
no. I didn't know you did 13.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So
I was supposed to do. I got over 26. 26 years and 4 months. But unlike you, I don't have any scruples about ratting out every single person. I was ready to cut every single person's throat I could to get out of that fucking prison. Mm-hmm. Everybody. But I was on the run for 3 years. So by the time they caught me, everybody had already cooperated. Mm-hmm. So when I was ready to fucking tell on everybody, that didn't help me. I ended up having to file a 2255 because they asked me to be interviewed by Dateline NBC News and American Greed. And then after I'd been locked up a couple of years, the government asked me to write an ethics and fraud course to help teach mortgage brokers. So I did that. And you know what they said when I said, okay, I did it? They said, you said you'd consider it substantial assistance. And they said, we did consider it, and it's not. And so I had to hire a guy. Well, not hire. I had to get a lawyer in prison who was in prison with me to file a 2255 to get the government to reduce my sentence by 7 years. So then I came back to prison, and a guy that I knew that was running a Ponzi scheme or had run a Ponzi scheme who was in the middle of cooperating against other people had buried a bunch of gold and money.
How much?
It turns out it was, well, one, he dug up like 6 million, I think, and given it to them. But he'd given his soon-to-be ex-wife money, gold. Well, it was gold and silver bars, and some cash. But he said it was like $100,000, $150,000. And he'd given his brother. He said he's got maybe 10 or 20,000. And I was like, oh, okay. And so a couple weeks later, maybe a month later, I was talking to my lawyer. I had asked her to send me some transcripts, which she never sent. So I called her to say, hey, you going to send those? And we were talking, and she asked me, anything going on in there? I was like, no, not really. Because I didn't think they would give me anything for saying anything. I was like, no, not really. And she goes, you sure? Nothing you want to talk about? And like, my lawyer never wanted to talk to me. Like it was almost weird. I was like, no, nothing. I went, well, I said, you know what's weird? I said, listen to this. And I told her what happened. And she just let me look into it. She didn't want to look into anything before. Like, wait, she wasn't even my lawyer anymore. Like, we were done. Yeah. I'd already been resentenced. So a week later, I get called by SIS. You know, the CO comes up to me and goes, Cox, you got to go to SIS. I'm like, what? Oh, okay. So I go to SIS. What's up? They're like, come here, sit down. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Hold on. Talk to this guy. Pick up the phone. Guy says, hey, my name is Agent so-and-so with the Secret Service. And I'm like, the fuck? I'm like, well, what's up? And he goes, I understand that you know where money has been hidden by Ron Wilson. And I went, oh, no, wait a minute. I said, I do, but it's not a lot of money. It's not millions of dollars. It's a little bit of money. And I want something in writing. So I'm not telling you anything. He's like, well, who's got it? I'm like, I'm not telling you anything. Like, get me something. Talk to my lawyer. So they ended up writing a letter saying, you give us something if somebody's indicted or we recover money. And I told them I wanted recovered money, any money, that I not wanted my sentence reduced because I didn't think they'd indict this guy. You know, like he got 19 and a half years.
I've never heard of anybody else burying gold. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He dug it up though. So
and gave it to the feds?
Gave it to him because, you know, he was trying to mitigate his role, which didn't help. It didn't help him. And he did that all prior. So what ended up happening was what happened was they ended up coming back and they gave me something in writing, which was bullshit. It was we'll consider it substantial assistance, which means nothing. But I had something in writing. So I said, okay. I said, look, this is all he told me. He told me his brother has maybe 20, 30 grand in cash. He told me his ex-wife has like 150,000 in cash, but he's afraid she's going to give it to you guys because she found out he was having an affair when they were married. They were in the middle of a divorce. And I said, that's it, you know? And he was in the middle of cooperating against his other co-defendants. So they were like, okay. So they call in his wife. His wife walks in with $350,000 in cash and gold and everything, completely. Like, he didn't tell me what she had. He told me kind of, but he lied. And then his brother comes in with $150,000. So it's $500,000. They re-indicted him. And he comes to me and says, oh my, you're not going to believe this. I've been re-indicted. I'm like, no, that's crazy. So he says, I said, what happened? He's like, yeah, they got $500,000. I'm like, $500,000? Like, I thought you said it was like 30 grand or 20 grand. He's like, nah, I didn't think I could trust you. So I didn't tell you the right amount. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, a couple days later, he's on a bus. He gets shipped back to South Carolina. He gets 6 more months. His ex-wife gets like 6 months probation. She didn't even have a felony. Neither does his brother, because they gave the money, up. So, so he got 6 more months, and we went to the government and said, hey, you got to reduce my sentence. And they said, it's just not enough. So we had to file another 2255 and got 5 more years off. And by the time the 5 more years hit, I basically walked out within a year. I walked right out of prison. Yeah. So my original out date was 2030. I'm supposed to be in prison right now. And so while I was locked up, I started writing guys' true crime stories. And so I'm in prison as a snitch. So you can imagine how well that went. Wow. I didn't have a lot of friends in a low. But yeah, I went to the halfway house and got out. And that's why when you were like, I wouldn't do it, I'd rather die. I was like, so well, I have a vastly different feeling about that.
Yeah. Well, you weren't in the drug game.
No, I was.
The drug game's a lot different. You know what I'm saying? It's like
all these guys are rolling over on each other.
I've learned that after I gave up paid all the money. I didn't realize. I didn't know. Like, I went into the game with a certain rule, like that. And then after I went through all this and I've gotten to this age where I'm at now, I see. And my lawyer even said, he goes, "Don't ever get back into the game. Everybody's a double agent."
Yeah, absolutely.
And I said, there you go. I said, fine. So
this is it's like 85% or 87% or 80% that people cooperate. Yeah. That's drugs. Like, it's even high. White collar crimes, it's even higher. Like, one of the lowest cooperation rates is sex offenders. But they don't have anybody to cooperate. Like, this is just some guy on a computer at home. Yeah. He doesn't even have an option. And even if he did, they're not going to give him anything. They're going to screw him over. So, but yeah, it's bro, it's a rough situation going into prison. But I definitely.
Let's leave it on a good note, because I remember. I left with the old guys, so let's do it on a good note. It's good to be free. It's good to be free. Make it legally.
Yeah.
It's so easy to make it legally, though. If I had just got right out of high school and started building houses like I wanted to with a freaking hammer and nail and started at the bottom, I'd have made millions. I would have made more. I would have made way more. That's why I'm going back into construction, build these retreats and stuff. So that's my play.
Yeah. Well, that's what I say. The amount of money I spent on the run and in prison, if I'd actually focused on something legitimate, I'm a hard worker.
Yeah.
I work 60, 70 hours a week. Like, I'm always hustling. So I'm going to make something work. Thank you for coming on the program. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. And we're going to leave a link to, is it on Amazon? Your book?
My book's on Amazon. Yep.
Okay. We'll leave the Amazon link to Eric's book. I appreciate him coming by. I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, leave me a comment in the comment section, subscribe, share the video, do all the stuff, and check out the books that I wrote and the trailers. See ya.
Using forgeries and bogus identities, Matthew B. Cox, one of the most ingenious con men in history, built America's biggest banks out of millions. Despite numerous encounters with bank security, state, and federal authorities, Cox narrowly, and quite luckily, avoided capture for years. Eventually, he topped the U.S. Secret Service's most wanted list and led the U.S. Marshals, FBI, and Secret Service on a 3-year chase, while jet-setting around the world with his attractive female accomplices. Cox has been declared one of the most prolific mortgage fraud con artists of all time by CNBC's American Greed. Bloomberg Businessweek called him the mortgage industry's worst nightmare, while Dateline NBC described Cox as a gifted forger and silver-tongued liar. Playboy magazine proclaimed his scam was real estate fraud, and he was the best. Shark in the Housing Pool is Cox's exhilarating first-person account of his stranger-than-fiction story. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Bent is the story of John J. Boziak's phenomenal life of crime. Inked from head to toe, with an addiction to strippers and fast Cadillacs, Boziak was not your typical computer geek. He was, however, one of the most cunning scammers, counterfeiters, identity thieves, and escape artists alive, and a major thorn in the side of the U.S. Secret Service as they fought a war on cybercrime. With a savant-like ability to circumvent banking security and stay one step ahead of law enforcement, Boziak made millions of dollars in the international cyber underworld, with the help of the Chinese and the Russians. Then, leaving nothing but a John Doe warrant and a cleaned-out bank account in his wake, he vanished. Boziak's stranger-than-fiction tale of ingenious scams and impossible escapes, of brazen run-ins with the law and secret desires to straighten out and settle down, makes his story a true crime con game that will keep you guessing. Bent: How a Homeless Teen Became One of the Cybercrime Industry's Most Prolific Counterfeiters. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Buried by the U.S. government and ignored by the national media, this is the story they don't want you to know. When Frank Amadeo met with President George W. Bush at the White House to discuss NATO operations in Afghanistan, no one knew that he'd already embezzled nearly $200 million from the federal government, money he intended to use to bankroll his plan to take over the world. From Amadeo's global headquarters in the shadow of Florida's Disney World, with a nearly inexhaustible supply of the Internal Revenue Service's funds, Amadeo acquired multiple businesses, amassing a mega conglomerate. Driven by his delusions of world conquest, he negotiated the purchase of a squadron of American fighter jets and the controlling interest in a former Soviet ICBM factory. He began working to build the largest private militia on the planet, over 1 million Africans strong. Simultaneously, Amadeo hired an international black ops force to orchestrate a coup in the Congo, while plotting to take over several small Eastern European countries. The most disturbing part of it all is, had the U.S. government not thwarted his plans, he might have just pulled it off. It's insanity, the bizarre, true story of a bipolar megalomaniac's insane plan for total world domination. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Pierre Rossini, in the 1990s, was a 20-something-year-old Los Angeles-based drug trafficker of ecstasy and ice. He and his associates drove luxury European supercars, lived in Beverly Hills penthouses, and dated Playboy models while dodging federal indictments. Then, two FBI officers with the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force entered the picture. Dirty agents willing to fix cases and identify informants. Suddenly, two of Rossini's associates, confidential informants working with federal law enforcement, were murdered. Everyone pointed to Rossini. As his co-defendants prepared for trial, U.S. Attorney Robert Mueller sat down to debrief Rossini at Leavenworth Penitentiary, and another story emerged. A tale of FBI corruption and complicity in murder. You see, Pierre Rossini knew something that no one else knew. The truth. And Robert Mueller and the federal government have been covering it up to this very day. Devil Exposed. A twisted tale of drug trafficking, corruption, and murder in the City of Angels. Available on Amazon and Audible.
Bailout is a psychological true crime thriller that pits a narcissistic conman against an egotistical, pathological liar. Marcus Schrinker, the money manager who attempted to fake his own death during the 2008 financial crisis, is about to be released from prison, and he's ready to talk. He's ready to tell you the story no one's heard. Schrinker sits down with true crime writer Matthew B. Cox, a fellow inmate serving time for bank fraud. Schrinker lays out the details: the disgruntled clients who persecuted him for unanticipated market losses, the affair that ruined his marriage, and the treachery of his scorned wife, the woman who framed him for securities fraud, leaving him no choice but to make a bogus distress call and plunge from his multi-million-dollar private aircraft in the dead of night. The $11.1 million in life insurance, the missing $1.5 million in gold. The fact is, Schrinker wants you to think he's innocent. The problem is, Cox knows Schrinker's a pathological liar, and his story's a fabrication. As Cox subtly coaxes, cajoles, and yes, cons Schrinker into revealing his deceptions, his stranger-than-fiction life of lies slowly unravels. This is the story Schrinker didn't want you to know. Bailout: The Life and Lies of Marcus Schrinker. Available now on Barnes & Noble, Etsy, and Audible.
Matthew B. Cox is a conman, incarcerated in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a variety of bank fraud-related scams. Despite not having a drug problem, Cox inexplicably ends up in the prison's residential drug abuse program, known as RDAP. A drug program in name only. RDAP is an invasive behavior modification therapy, specifically designed to correct the cognitive thinking errors associated with criminal behavior. The program is a non-fiction dark comedy which chronicles Cox's side-splitting journey. This first-person account is a fascinating glimpse at the Survivor-like atmosphere inside of the government-sponsored rehabilitation unit. While navigating the treachery of his backstabbing peers, Cox simultaneously manipulates prison policies and the bumbling staff every step of the way. The program: How a Conman Survived the Federal Bureau of Prisons' Cult of RDAP. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
If you saw anything you like, links to all the books are in the description box.